Welcome back to the channel, everyone. In this video I'm going to be talking about how I keep my tiny greenhouse warm over winter. So let's get straight into it.
Great northern exotic, botanist vibes hypnotic, cacti in the crib.
Well, thanks for joining me on this one. I'm going to be talking about my greenhouse, which is 4 foot by 6 foot, and I'm going to be giving advice for anyone thinking of how they keep their greenhouse warm over winter, with or without power. Now mine does have electric hooked up, and I'm going to explain the benefits of that, but if you are not in a position to have any electricity in your greenhouse, I'm going to talk about some alternatives that you might want to consider. Now, first things first, bubble wrap is your friend. So as I step into the greenhouse, even though we have got a very small footprint here of 4 foot by 6 foot, I've zoned off the section of the greenhouse that I want to keep warm. Now the area that I'm standing in now is probably making up 1/3 of the greenhouse, which doesn't need to be heated. Like, this is a Sontrus. It's the only thing out here, and I don't need to keep this at a certain temperature really over winter. So I've bubble wrapped everything. I do bubble wrap over the door as well, but I've just taken this off for today. So I would look at getting yourself bubble wrap if that's the first thing you need to spend money on, if you haven't already, is clip bubble wrap and wrap as much of your greenhouse as possible. But do consider the areas of your greenhouse. Do you need to wrap the whole thing? Are you trying to keep the whole thing warm? I'm not. So I've bubble wrapped just the area that in there that I'm trying to keep warm. Now I'm keeping cacti and succulents in there, and I've got a certain minimum temperature in mind that I'm trying to keep it at, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. Now we're just going to have a little peek through the bubble wrap to the back wall, and I want to talk about the back wall because if you can see there behind the sign and the cacti, I've got some other special type of bubble wrap. It's foil insulation. The brand I'm using is Thermawrap, and I am going to put a link in the description to all of the things I'm using for my greenhouse, which will be an affiliate link for Amazon. So if you do buy it through that link, I may get a small percentage of that. Most of it will go to Jeff Bezos, of course. But I'm using their Thermawrap insulation, which comes on a roll. It's got adhesive on the back, and it is essentially 2 layers of foil insulation with a layer of bubbles in between it, and I've covered the north side of that. So of course, if you're in the northern hemisphere like me, then you will want to think about covering the north side of your greenhouse where no direct light will be coming, and the opposite, of course, if you're on the southern hemisphere. Yeah, essentially my thinking is that the sun will never come through those windows at the back to the north side of the greenhouse. There'll never be direct sunlight hitting that. So all year, and it's a permanent fixture, this foil bubble wrap, any sun hitting it from the east, west or south will reflect back the warmth and the light onto the plants. So I would recommend something to think about if you have a greenhouse where you can do that, is permanently covering the north face with foil bubble wrap. But yeah, that's my first tip. Just bubble wrap and insulate the greenhouse. Now, one thing to mention with bubble wrap is, of course, only bubble wrapping and insulating the greenhouse, all you do is delay the time that the inside temperature falls to the equivalent of the outside temperature. So let's say you're looking at something like -5 degrees at night. If it hits -5 outside and you've insulated, all you're doing is delaying the time that the temperature falls to -5. And you may be looking, it may stay a couple of degrees above that if it doesn't have time to cool down. But really, without an additional heat source, all you're really doing is you're keeping the frost off. That's great. If you're trying to keep your plants frost-free, that's great. But if you're trying to keep your plants to a certain temperature, like I am with my cacti, then you are going to have to consider an additional heat source. So first of all, I've got power. I had a local electrician install power to my greenhouse, and it is really it just makes things easier. Okay, so if you can't do that, if you're in rented accommodation, or you just can't have there's another reason why you can't have power in your greenhouse, I would recommend looking up something like a paraffin heater or some other kind of traditional greenhouse heater and using that on the particular cold days. But you will have to, of course, keep an eye on nighttime low temperatures on the BBC weather app or whatever weather app you use. And you've got to be very, very vigilant. Like, you've got to look ahead and plan ahead. And, you know, if you know there's a freeze coming, you're going to have to come out at night, set up the heater, and then get up in the morning and turn it off. And there are obviously costs involved with refueling those heaters and whatnot. But for me, the beauty of having electricity is automation. You can automate things, and it just gives you that peace of mind to not have to worry about constantly checking the weather apps. And you know that if you have your system set up in the right way, if the temperature falls below what you want it to fall to, then you don't have to worry. So yeah, I'm going to talk about my electrical setup on my heater. And now essentially under this bench I have got a bar heater, and you can see there's a bar heater, and it is turned on, and it's about 2 foot, and it's a low wattage. I've put a link in the description to that. The drinks, by the way, are for slugs, not me. But yeah, if you look in the description below, you'll see a link to these bar heaters. Now, these bar heaters are fantastic for just raising the ambient temperature. They give off a nice amount of heat, but it's just enough to raise things a few degrees. And of course, when you're thinking about the volume it has to heat, this is why I've created this sort of area where it's reducing the volume of air that it has to heat. And of course, heat rises, so I would recommend having that bar low down, and the heat can rise then into your plants, etc. Now, my aim is to keep my plants at 5 degrees or above, 5 degrees Celsius or above, which I think for most cacti and succulents, that will be adequate heating. And tropical cacti and succulents will need to be 10 degrees, but for me 5 degrees is fine. So what I've got here is this thermostat, again, link in the description, and you can change. Let me just I'll have to reset it. There we go, look. So you can see that the temperature here is 7 degrees. So I've got it set to minimum temperature, but you can have it set to maximum temperature in summer. If you want to have a fan, for example, you can set a maximum temperature of, say, 30 degrees Celsius, and then if it goes above that, a fan will come on. But I've got it set to minimum temperature of 7 degrees. Now, this has been a bit of trial and error for me. I'm trying to keep it at 5 degrees, so I've set 7 degrees, which is working to keep it at 5 degrees. So what that will mean is that if you look here, you can move it up and down, and you can change the minimum temperature. So now I've got it set to 7 degrees. Anytime the actual temperature in the greenhouse falls to 7 degrees, it will turn the power on, and it will start up the bar heater. Now the bar heater will be on, and I've got an app for this that's not connected to this setup. I'll show the app in a minute. But the theory is that anytime the temperature falls below 7 degrees, the bar will turn on, and then when the temperature's risen to 7 degrees, again above 7 degrees, it will turn off. So I'm not having to come in and out of the house down to the greenhouse to turn things on and off. It's just done for me. Saves power, saves energy, saves money, and it's that peace of mind that I think is worth investing in electricity for your greenhouse. Thing I'll mention, I've just brought this heater out here just as another example that if you haven't got a bar heater and you've got one of these in your house that you're using for like a particular cold room, you can stick this in for a particularly cold winter and it'll do the job a little bit quicker. But of course it's a higher wattage and it'll be more expensive to use one of them. So the bar heater works for me on all but the very coldest of days, I would say. And there's a couple of nights a year when maybe the temperature falls to -5 or below, when I think I'll just, for peace of mind, I'll stick this one on for that night. So that's my setup. If it falls below 7 degrees, the bar comes on. But then I've got another gadget which I think is awesome, and it's just in that corner there, and you can see it there. It is a sensor push, temperature and humidity sensor. There you can see the sensor push. So what I'll do is I'll put on the screen the app that you can get with the sensor push, and it works by Bluetooth. But you can buy a Wi-Fi hub if you want to have it connected to Wi-Fi as well. But essentially, it produces a line graph of your a very accurate line graph to the 10th of a degree Celsius. That shows you the temperature there. So on a night, I can see how often the bar heater has had to come on. So I'll overlay a few clips of that, and you'll be able to see that. For example, whenever the temperature has dropped enough, it's taken the bar heater about 15 minutes to warm up the air to the point where it clicks off again. So you'll see on a night where the temperature drops below 5, there'll be like a wavy line as the heaters come on and off, on and off, on and off. Before I had this set up with the thermostat, I would obviously just have to come and turn this on and leave it overnight, hoping that it keeps the temperature raised. But the system is working, because if I kind of scroll back on the app through the month, through the days, and look at the month-long one, you can see that the minimum temperature hit is about 4.9, 4.8 degrees, which essentially is perfect for me. So if you want to track your temperature accurately over the year, over the month, and just have that peace of mind that you know exactly that your system is working, I would consider picking up something like a sensor push sensor. And again, I'll put the links in the description for that. Yeah, it's worth considering. And that's my setup for my greenhouse. And of course, one other thing to think about is maybe this is another step for me, but I am thinking of adding an electric dehumidifier in here to keep things nice and dry. Now, of course, if you are a cactus grower, most things will not have been watered since September or October, and there won't be again until March or April. I've got a few of these dehumidifying blocks in here. Now they haven't got any water in, and they've been in there a few weeks, so I do know they work. But maybe getting some a dehumidifier in here would help. But of course, I do leave a hole in the bubble wrap here, so when the auto vent does open on a particularly hot day, we can get a little bit of fresh air in there and keep the humidity down. But that is my setup in my tiny greenhouse. It's evolved over a number of years. The most popular video on my channel is me explaining this setup, or an earlier version of this setup a couple of years ago, and it will continue to evolve. But it works for me, and it works in this tiny greenhouse, and I'm pretty confident that all, or the vast majority, apart from one or two of my plants, will survive into spring at this temperature and this humidity. So do let me know in the comments if you have any questions about my setup. It's only one idea. Of course, there are many different ways you can winterize your greenhouse, and I am interested in anyone who's got any suggestions for improvements or any ideas that I might be able to use going forward. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.